The dragon court gathered to watch Cyrra Noct fail to cast a shadow. No one expected the Dragon King's own shadow to leave him instead. The eclipse had turned the palace blue. Not silver, not black. Blue, like moonlight drowned beneath deep water. It poured through the open roof of the eclipse hall and fell across the marble in a perfect circle where every noble of Valcair was required to stand once in a lifetime. A person's shadow, under eclipse light, was believed to reveal what Dragonfire saw when blood and title were stripped away. Noble shadows bowed. Soldier shadows knelt. Priest shadows stretched toward the altar like obedient smoke. Cyrra's shadow did nothing, because Cyrra had never had one. She stood barefoot at the edge of the black sun circle with the entire court, watching the empty space behind her. Her pale gray dress had been washed too many times, its hem darkened by ash from the temple braziers. Her dark hair was tied back without jewels. Her wrists bore the plain copper cuffs of a royal ward, not servant chains, not noble bracelets. Something colder between both. Proof that she had been kept, but never claimed. High Eclipse Priestess Cyrra Noct lifted one black-gloved hand. The hall went silent. "Cyrra Noct," she said, her voice carrying beneath the eclipse like a blade under silk. "Ward of the East Wing. Foundling of unverified blood. Entered under palace mercy. After the sunless plague. Raised beneath royal roof, but never entered into dragon lineage, temple oath, or noble shadow record." Cyrra kept her eyes forward. She had learned young that humiliation worsened when it found a moving target. From the galleries, the nobles leaned closer. She could feel their hunger. Not the hunger to kill her. That would have been easier to understand. This was the cleaner hunger of people waiting for the world to confirm what they already believed. That a girl without a shadow was not wounded, but unfinished. Cyrra turned toward the Dragon King. Orion Valcair sat on the eclipse throne beneath a crown of dark gold and black crystal. He was young for a king, not yet 35, but power had carved age into stillness around him. His black armor held faint dragon-scale ridges along the shoulders. His hair was dark, swept back from a face too controlled to look kind. His eyes were a dangerous gold, the color of fire seen through smoke. Behind him, his shadow lay across the marble. It should have been shaped like a man. It was not. Not completely. At its edges, something scaled twitched beneath the blue light. A wing claw. A horned curve. The suggestion of a dragon too large to fit behind a human body. Cyrra noticed because she had spent her entire life watching shadows other people trusted. And because the king's shadow looked sick. Cyrra lowered her hand toward Cyrra. Under the royal eclipse rite, every soul must prove it can carry the shape that follows it. A shadowless ward cannot hold dragon oath, dragon memory, or dragon mercy. She is empty ground. Empty ground. A place with no shadow cannot be held responsible by mercy, Cyrra added. The words moved through the hall with soft approval. Cyrra's fingers tightened once at her sides. That was all she allowed herself. She had been called worse in quieter rooms. Hollow child. Sunless thing. Palace mistake. The girl who made candles look foolish because even flame could not pull darkness from her feet. As a child, servants had made her stand near walls at noon to test whether the sun had forgiven her. It never had. At 14, she was forbidden from entering the dragon nursery because the temple declared shadowless skin could not be trusted near newborn fire. At 17, she stopped looking behind herself entirely. But today was different. Today they were not only naming her empty, they were making it law. Cyrra turned to the court scribes. "Record the judgment." A scribe dipped his quill into blue-black ink. Cyrra Noct. No shadow verified. No dragon capacity. No oath weight. No palace protection after eclipse. The last sentence struck harder than the first three. No palace protection. Protection, she had learned, was only another word for belonging written by people who had never been asked to prove they deserved walls. She looked up. Not at Cyrra, at Orion. For one breath, the Dragon King's gaze met hers. There was no warmth there. No rescue. No softness. But there was something else. Something he concealed too quickly. Recognition. Or fear. He knew enough to fear the ritual, not enough to stop it. Cyrra could not tell which one hurt more. Celine spoke again. By eclipse law, she must cross the black sun circle and leave the palace before the light returns. If she remains after the eclipse passes, her emptiness may contaminate the dragon throne. A murmur of agreement rose. Cyrra finally found her voice. Contaminate it with what? The hall stilled. Celine's eyes narrowed. Cyrra looked at the empty marble behind her feet. You keep saying I carry nothing. Someone in the noble gallery inhaled sharply. Celine descended one step from the altar. Boldness is not substance. No, Cyrra said. But neither is fear dressed as law. The words were quiet. They still reached the throne. Orion's fingers closed around the arm of his chair. A faint tremor passed through the shadow behind him. Celine noticed. For the first time, her calm tightened. Enough, she said. Let the ward cross. 2 temple guards approached, but Cyrra moved before they touched her. She would not let them drag her through the circle. If exile was the only dignity left to her, she would walk into it on her own feet. The black sun circle waited at the center of the hall. Every noble shadow bent away from it. Cyrra stepped onto the outer ring. Cold climbed through her soles. The eclipse light thickened around her, blue and heavy, clinging to her skin as if searching for something to pull from underneath. The court watched the marble behind her. Nothing appeared. No shadow. No hidden dragon shape. No proof of inner fire. Only Cyrra. Alone in the center of a kingdom that had finally found a sacred way to say she did not belong. She crossed the first line. The temple bells rang once. She crossed the second. The scribes wrote faster. She crossed the third, toward the western arch where the exiled left and the protected stayed behind. Then the Dragon King made a sound. Not a command. A sharp breath. Cyrra stopped. Every head turned toward the throne. Orion Valcair had risen. His face had gone pale beneath the eclipse light, and the shadow at his feet was tearing, not fading, tearing. It split from the soles of his boots like black silk being ripped from bone. The court cried out. Celine snapped a hand toward the altar, but too late. The Dragon King's shadow loosened fully from him, dragging its scaled wings across the marble. Huge and malformed and alive, Orion did not move. For the first time since Cyrra had known his name, the king looked afraid. The shadow did not attack the court. It crawled toward Cyrra, slowly, desperately, like something dying had recognized the only place it was allowed to go. Cyrra backed away one step. The shadow followed. Celine's voice cracked across the hall. Do not let it reach her. The temple guards drew blades of eclipse glass. Orion raised one hand, but the gesture shook. Whether he meant to stop the guards or call the shadow back, Cyrra never knew, because the shadow reached the hem of her gray dress and stopped. The entire hall held its breath. Cyrra looked down. The Dragon King's shadow lifted its head from the marble. Not human. Dragon. A vast black dragon skull formed out of darkness at her feet. Its eyes empty blue flame, its jaws trembling like it had been starving in silence for years. Then it bowed to the girl who had never cast a shadow of her own. And from the floor beneath her, in a voice only Cyrra seemed to hear, it whispered one word. Keeper. The word keeper did not make Cyrra feel chosen. It made her feel accused. The Dragon King's shadow remained bowed at her feet, its vast skull pressed low against the blue-lit marble, its empty flame eyes turned toward the hem of her plain gray dress as if it had found a door after years of starving in a sealed room. The court did not kneel with it. The nobles did not whisper in reverence. No one looked at Cyrra as if she had been blessed. They looked at her as if something dangerous had finally learned her name. High Eclipse Priestess Celine Orvath raised both hands. Contain the shadow. The temple guards moved at once. Their eclipse glass blades caught the blue light and turned almost invisible, thin as frozen smoke, sharp enough to cut through shadow without leaving blood. Cyrra had seen those blades only once before, carried past the east wing after a noble child's shadow had grown horns during fever. The child survived. The shadow did not. The first guard stepped toward the bowed dragon shadow. Cyrra moved before she understood she had chosen to. She stepped between the blade and the shadow. The hall inhaled. Celine's face tightened. Move away from it. Cyrra felt the shadow behind her shift. It did not merge with her. It did not climb her body or wrap itself around her like power. It withdrew behind her ankles like a wounded beast taking shelter behind the only wall that had not struck it. That frightened her more than if it had attacked, because it trusted her, and she did not know why. Orion Valcair descended from the eclipse throne. Every noble bowed a little as he passed, though none dared look away from the darkness that had abandoned his feet. Without his shadow attached to him, the Dragon King seemed both more human and more terrible. His armor still gleamed black. His crown still burned with dark gold, but the space behind him was empty now, and that emptiness made the court uneasy. A king without a shadow looked like a law missing its witness. "Return," Orion commanded. The dragon's shadow trembled behind Cyrra. It did not move toward him. Orion's jaw hardened. "Return to me." The shadow lowered its skull further. Not in obedience, but refusal. A whisper moved through the court. Cyrra turned slowly toward him. "It does not want to." His gold eyes cut to her. For one instant, anger flashed there. Not because she had insulted him, because she had said aloud what his command had failed to hide. Selene stepped between them. "Your Majesty, do not engage with the ward. A keeper is trained by absence to invite attachment." Cyrra looked at her. "I was not trained. I was ignored." Those are often the same thing when the vessel is useful. The words were too clean, too prepared. Cyrra felt the court shift around that sentence. Vessel. Useful. Words that did not belong to a sudden miracle. Words belonging to something already filed somewhere under temple lock. Orion heard it too. His eyes moved from Cyrra to Selene. "You know what she is." Selene did not deny it. "I know what she was made to prevent." Cyrra's throat tightened. "Maud." The dragon shadow shivered behind her. Cyrra looked down at the empty marble beside her bare feet, at the place where her own shadow had never appeared. All her life, people had stared at that emptiness and decided it meant she lacked something. No one had ever asked whether something had been taken. She lifted her eyes to Selene. "Do not fight over what you first called nothing." The priestess went still. Orion stopped walking. The sentence landed in the hall like a thrown blade. Cyrra's voice shook, but she did not lower it. "You called me empty when it helped you exile me. Now you call me vessel because something of the king's crawled after me. Choose one lie at a time." A faint sound came from the shadow behind her. Not laughter. Fine. Selene's mouth thinned. The keeper line was erased for a reason. Keepers could make dragon shadows remember unlawful kings, broken rites, monstrous forms, and death shadows that should never return to the body that shed them. Orion's expression changed at the last phrase. Death shadow. Cyrra felt the word move through him before it reached her. His hand tightened at his side, and beneath the blue eclipse light, the veins at his wrist darkened like ink under skin. "What was done to my shadow?" he asked. Selene turned toward him too quickly. "What was necessary?" That is not an answer. It is the only answer that kept Valcair standing. The dragon shadow rose slightly behind Cyrra, its wing shape scraping over the marble. At once, the eclipse circle beneath their feet began to pulse. Black sun. Blue ring. Empty center. The court gasped as the marble turned liquid dark. A memory opened beneath them. Cyrra saw a boy in a white ceremonial tunic standing inside the same eclipse circle years ago. Orion, younger, no crown yet, perhaps 8 or 9, his face pale but proud in the way children looked when adults had taught them fear was shame. Behind him, his small shadow stretched wrong. Too large, too horned, too hungry. Selene was there, younger but already cold, standing with temple elders around the circle. A voice from the memory said, "If the prince carries the death shadow into maturity, the eclipse-dragon will wake before the throne can bind him." Young Orion looked toward someone outside the circle. "Will it hurt?" No one answered. That was answer enough. The memory shifted. A child Cyrra stood in the east wing corridor, thin, silent, holding a cracked wooden bird. She had a shadow then. Small, soft, hairs. A temple woman knelt before her, offering sweetened milk. The child drank. Her eyes closed. Her shadow peeled from the wall like fabric pulled from a wound. Cyrra's adult body went cold. In the memory, the child did not scream. She had been sleeping when they emptied her. The stolen shadow was carried into the eclipse circle, where young Orion's monstrous dragon shadow thrashed against blue fire. The two shadows were pressed together. The girl's quiet shadow wrapped around the prince's death shadow, hiding it, softening its edges, making it look like absence instead of danger. Then the little girl woke without a shadow, and the prince woke with no memory of what had been cut from him. The floor returned to marble. No one spoke. Cyrra could not feel her hands. Orion stared at Selene as if the whole palace had tilted beneath him. "You put part of me inside her." No one had asked the girl whether saving a kingdom could cost her body. Selene's answer was calm. "We put the part that would have devoured your kingdom into a place no one would think to search." Cyrra laughed once. It sounded broken even to her. A place with no shadow. The priestess looked at her. A place that could not be held responsible by mercy. The old sentence came back sharper now. Not cruelty spoken in ignorance. A rule built over the crime. Orion took one step towards Cyrra. The dragon shadow behind her recoiled. Not from him exactly, but from the need in him. Cyrra saw it. So did he. That mattered. Not enough to forgive him, but enough to make the silence dangerous. "You did not lose your shadow tonight," Cyrra said. "I found what was hidden in mine." Orion's face tightened as if each word cut deeper because it was true. Then the eclipse circle beneath them opened. Not cracked. Opened. Blue-black light poured upward, and the marble became transparent beneath every foot in the hall. Below the eclipse hall was not stone. It was a vault of shadows. Hundreds of them. Child shadows. Servant shadows. Noble shadows. Dragon-winged shadows. Shadows with hands pressed against invisible glass. Shadows with mouths open in silent testimony. The court screamed. Selene whispered, "Close it." But the black sun circle widened under Cyrra's feet, and every stolen shadow beneath the palace turned its face toward her. Not in worship. In recognition of the first theft that had survived. The vault had not opened to crown Cyrra. It had opened to count what the palace had taken. Beneath the eclipse hall, hundreds of shadows pressed their hands, wings, claws, and broken mouths against the blue-black glass of the sun circle. They made no sound. That was worse. Screaming would have made them seem alive in a way the court could understand. Silence made them look like evidence waiting for a language old enough to receive it. Cyrra stood at the center of the circle with the Dragon King's death shadow crouched behind her. Its black wings folded low, its empty blue eyes fixed on the vault below. It did not touch her. It did not claim her. It only stayed close. Like a wounded creature that had finally remembered where it had been hidden. Around them, nobles stumbled backward from the transparent marble. Some screamed because the vault existed. Others screamed because they recognized what moved inside it. A lord in a green dragon-scaled mantle clutched his chest as a thin, elegant shadow below lifted its head and mirrored his exact profile. A young noblewoman covered her mouth when a child-sized shadow pressed both palms against the glass beneath her feet. Two temple scribes dropped their ink trays and fled toward the locked doors as winged shadows below unfolded in perfect imitation of the black oaths embroidered on their robes. Cyrra understood before anyone said it. Not all the stolen shadows belonged to the dead. Some belonged to people standing in the hall. Selene Orvath snapped her hands toward the altar. "Close the vault." The eclipse braziers flared blue. The black sun circle trembled, but it did not close. Selene's calm cracked only along the edges. "Close it before unreturned shadows break noble oaths." Cyrra turned toward her. "Whose shadow was taken after mine?" The question cut through the panic. Selene's eyes sharpened. "You do not understand what you are asking." "No," Cyrra said. "I understand that you answer only when the floor does." The black sun circle pulsed beneath her bare feet. Blue light rippled across the glass below. Then words appeared inside the darkness, not carved in stone, not written in ink, but shaped from the shadows themselves. Eclipse Vault Register. Purpose. Containment of removed shadows. Altered oaths. Unstable dragon memory. And unlawful witness. Shapes. A hiss moved through the court. The vault continued. Subject. Cyrra Noct. Original shadow removed during East Wing sedation. Shadow repurposed as containment veil for royal death shadow. Cyrra's hands went cold. She had known it already. She had seen it. But reading it in the vault's own dark made the theft feel less like memory and more like a wound with a number beside it. The register shifted. Subsequent removals authorized under temple preservation law. Replacement shadows issued for court stability. Orion's face hardened. Replacement shadows? Celine lifted her chin. Oath shadows. Temporary structures shaped to keep dangerous bloodlines loyal. Grief. Sick nobles functional. And dragon houses from tearing themselves apart under eclipse pressure. Cyrra looked at the nobles. Now she saw it. Not with power. With the bitter clarity of someone who had spent her life watching what others ignored. Some shadows in the hall stood too straight. Some bowed half a breath before their owners moved. Some clung to noble heels like trained dogs. Too obedient, too polished, too empty of private sorrow. The palace had not only stolen shadows, it had manufactured obedience in their place. Orion stepped toward the open circle. I will see the vault. The death shadow behind Cyrra surged. Not toward the court. Toward him. Its black wings spread across the marble, forming a wall between the Dragon King and the opening beneath his own palace. Orion stopped, jaw tight. As the shadow's empty blue eyes locked onto him, he could command armies. He could not command the piece of himself that remembered being stolen. His voice lowered. Move. The death shadow did not. Cyrra turned slightly. Do not ask me to keep what you are afraid to remember. Orion's gaze snapped to her. The anger came first. Then the shame behind it. I did not ask you to keep it. No, she said. But you sat on the throne while they used my emptiness to hide it. The death shadow behind her made no sound, but Orion looked as if it had agreed. The hall stilled. It was not a loud accusation. That made it worse. Celine moved quickly into the silence. Keepers were erased because they could return shadows to their owners. You think that sounds merciful, but it is chaos. A returned shadow can break a marriage oath, expose a false lineage, wake a dragon form buried for good reason, or make a loyal noble remember why he once refused the crown. Then the loyalty was never clean, Cyrra said. No loyalty is clean enough to rule with, Celine answered. There it was again. The temple's favorite kind of cruelty, fear dressed as wisdom. Below the glass, one small shadow lifted both hands. Cyrra recognized it. Not the child. The shape. The fever child. She whispered. Celine's expression froze. Orion looked at her. What fever child? Cyrra did not take her eyes from the small shadow below. I saw the blades carried past the east wing after a noble child's shadow grew horns during fever. They said the child lived. Celine's silence answered the rest. The shadow had not. Cyrra knelt at the edge of the circle. The death shadow behind her drew closer, but not to stop her. It lowered its head beside her shoulder. Watching the little shadow press its palms upward, Cyrra felt no power rushing into her. No crown, no throne, no sudden holiness. Only the ache of recognition. The unbearable understanding that emptiness had never been absence. It had been storage. What is the child's name? She asked. The vault answered. Aureven. Age 6 at removal. Condition. Horned shadow fever. Family status preserved through replacement shadow. A noblewoman in the gallery let out a broken cry. My son, she whispered. A pale boy near her stared at the floor, his living body casting a graceful, obedient shadow behind him. Too graceful. Too still. When his mother touched his shoulder, the shadow bowed before he did. Cyrra's stomach turned. She placed one hand on the glass. Celine's voice sharpened. Do not return it. Cyrra looked back at her. Why? Because he will die? No. Because he will become monstrous? Celine did not answer. The vault did. Returned shadow may restore original fear, grief, refusal, and memory. Cyrra looked at the boy. Then he will become his own. She pressed her palm harder against the circle. The glass did not open. Instead, her absent place behind her feet darkened for the first time in her life. Not into a full shadow. Not hers. A doorway shaped like what had been taken. The small shadow below rose through it like smoke returning to breath. Across the hall, the boy's replacement shadow peeled away from his feet and dissolved into blue ash. He gasped, clutching his chest, as the horned little shadow slid back into place behind him. For one terrible second, the horns sharpened. The court recoiled. Then the boy began to sob. Not with pain, with memory. "I told them no," he cried. "I told them I did not want the oath." His replacement shadow had been obedient for him all these years. His mother fell to her knees. Cyrra's hand trembled against the glass. Restoration was possible. Not harmless. Not gentle. But possible. The returned shadow lifted its horned head behind the boy. It did not kneel. It pointed at Celine. The court understood the horror at once. If one returned shadow could point, every stolen shadow below the palace could testify. Celine Orvath stood beneath the horned shadow's accusation without moving. That was the first thing Cyrra noticed. Not guilt, not fear, stillness. The kind trained into people who had spent years preparing for the moment their crimes found a mouth. The boy, Oral Ven, sobbed against his mother's skirts while his returned shadow remained upright behind him. Small and horned and trembling with a fury no child should have had to carry alone. Its dark arm stayed lifted. One thin finger aimed at the high eclipse priestess. Celine's voice was cold. "Unstable shadows cannot testify." The vault answered before anyone else could. Original refusal restored. Witness valid. The words formed beneath the transparent marble in blue-black fire. A sound passed through the nobles, low and panicked. Not because they cared about Oral, because if a child's restored shadow could be named valid, then every oath sealed by temple shadow work could be questioned. Every obedient heir, every convenient marriage, every peaceful succession that had seemed too clean to be honest. Orion looked at the boy. "What did you refuse?" Oral's mother clutched him tighter, but the boy lifted his wet face. His lips shook. His shadow did not bow for him anymore. "The Eastern binding," he whispered. "They wanted me to swear the Ven line to the temple before my dragon fire came in." I said, "No." His mother's face broke. "You never told me." Oral looked at her with a child's wounded confusion. "I tried. Then I stopped wanting to." The shadow behind him curled inward. Not in shame, but in memory. Cyrra understood. A returned shadow did not make a person pure. It made them answerable to themselves again. The mother turned slowly toward Celine. "You replaced his refusal." Celine's gaze remained fixed on Cyrra. "I preserved a noble house from a child's dangerous defiance." "No," Cyrra said. "You made his obedience wear his body." The sentence struck harder than she expected. Several nobles looked away from the shadows at their feet. Not all of them moved correctly. Now that Cyrra knew what to see, the hall had become unbearable. A lord's shadow bowed while his chin remained lifted. A lady's shadow reached toward the vault, while her hands stayed folded at her waist. A temple guard's shadow pressed both palms flat to the floor, begging downward, while the man himself held his blade steady. The palace was full of bodies living beside trained lies. Orion turned to Celine. "Open the removal records." Celine's face sharpened. "No." The single word rang through the eclipse hall. Not refusal from a servant to a king. Refusal from the power behind him. Orion stepped toward her. "I did not ask." "No," Celine said. "You commanded with a throne that does not yet know what it is." The blue light around his hands darkened. The death shadow behind Cyrra stirred at the sound of his title, its vast wings scraping across the marble. It did not move toward Celine. It turned its skull toward Orion, as if the words king, throne, command had touched some buried pain inside it. Cyrra felt it through the floor. Not power. Recognition. She looked at Orion. "What did your shadow refuse?" The question changed him. Not visibly at first. His face remained hard. His body still. His crown steady beneath the eclipse light. But his eyes went colder. Not with anger at her, but with the fear of a door opening inside his own name. Celine answered too quickly. His shadow refused monstrosity. The vault corrected her. False classification. The entire court went silent. Cyrra's heart struck hard against her ribs. Orion looked down at the vault. Then what did it refuse? The black sun circle pulsed once. Records rose beneath their feet. Subject: Orion Valcair. Age: 9. Condition: premature eclipse. Dragon emergence. Death shadow unstable. Refusal recorded. Throne. Binding. Celine's lips pressed together. Cyrra read the words again. Throne binding. Not throne. Binding. You told him his shadow would devour the kingdom, Cyrra said. Celine's eyes remained on Orion. Because it would have, the vault answered. Unproven. For the first time, the high eclipse priestess flinched. Orion saw it. So did Cyrra. The death shadow rose higher behind her, its dragon skull lifting, its empty eyes brightening with blue flame. It did not look monstrous now. It looked furious from too many years of being named monster by those who needed it silent. The vault continued. Original death shadow refused crown obedience rite. Temple interpretation. Future royal instability. Corrective measure. Separation. Containment veil required. Subject selected. Cyrra Noct. Cyrra's breath thinned. There it was. Not a divine purpose. Not a secret destiny. A selection. A girl chosen because no one would miss what she lost. Orion stared at the record as if each word had been carved into his bones. My dragon did not refuse me. No, Cyrra said quietly. It refused what they wanted you to become. The death shadow made a sound behind her. Low, broken, almost grateful. Celine turned on Cyrra. Do not pretend you understand dragon rule, because stolen shadows look at you. A crown cannot be governed by every wounded thing it creates. Cyrra looked at the vault below them, at the hands pressed upward, at the shadows waiting for record after record to be named. No, she said. But it can be judged by them. The eclipse braziers exploded blue. Celine lifted both arms, and every oath shadow in the hall snapped upright at once. Noble shadows, guard shadows, priest shadows. All the replacements turned toward Cyrra with unnatural obedience. The court screamed as their own feet betrayed them. Orion moved between Cyrra and the rows of false shadows. The death shadow behind her surged forward, but Cyrra raised one hand. Do not, she whispered. Both king and shadow stopped. She felt the danger of that moment. How easily protection could become another kind of taking. How quickly everyone wanted to fight over the place where pain had been hidden. Cyrra stepped forward herself. The false shadows trembled. Celine's voice cut through the hall. You cannot return them all. Every restoration will break something. Oaths, marriages, titles, heirs, armies. You will make the kingdom remember why it needed us. Cyrra looked at Oral, still shaking in his mother's arms. Then at Orion, whose face had gone pale beneath the truth. Then at the death shadow waiting behind her. Not obedient. Not safe. But listening. I am not returning them all tonight, she said. The vault quieted. I am asking what each one refused. The shadows below pressed closer to the glass. Not in worship. In record. Celine's expression changed. Because that was worse than chaos. It was process. One by one, the vault began writing. Refusal of forced temple oath. Refusal of marriage seal. Refusal of war vow. Refusal of dragon binding. Refusal of false succession. The eclipse hall filled with the sound of noble power beginning to crack. Orion looked down at the records, then at Celine. You built my court out of removed refusal. Celine's answer was sharp. I built you a court that obeyed. The death shadow finally moved. It stepped out from behind Cyrra. No one stopped it. It crossed the black sun circle, huge and horned and dragon-shaped, its body made of every darkness the temple had tried to make useful. It stopped before Orion, not bowing, not attacking. The Dragon King looked at it as a man facing the part of himself he had been taught to fear. Then the death shadow spoke aloud. The first word it said was not keeper. It said no. The single word did not echo. It judged. The death shadow stood before Orion Valcair with its horned skull lowered just enough to meet the Dragon King's eyes. It had no flesh, no blood, no throat that should have been able to shape speech. Yet the word it had spoken remained in the eclipse hall like a blade left upright in stone. No, not atantrum, not rebellion. A refusal that had survived being buried inside a girl's absence for more than 20 years. The false oath shadows around the hall trembled. Some still stood upright behind their owners. Some bent halfway between obedience and memory, unable to decide which master to follow. Nobles clutched at their own feet as if they could hold their shadows in place by force. Celine Orvath recovered first. She always did. "Do not listen to it," she said. "A death shadow speaks only from appetite." The vault corrected her. "Death shadow testimony valid." The words burned beneath the transparent marble in blue-black fire. Orion did not look away from the shadow. "What did you refuse?" The death shadow's empty blue eyes brightened. Its answer came slowly, as if the words had to climb out from under years of temple seals. "Chen." The eclipse hall tightened around the word. Celine stepped forward. "Your Majesty." "That is enough." Orion's voice lowered. "No, it is not." The death shadow's wings dragged across the marble. "Crown chain. Throne chain. Fire command." Cyrra felt the words enter the vault below them. Hundreds of stolen shadows pressed closer to the glass. Not in worship, but in recognition. Each refusal was a language they understood. The vault opened another record. Royal Eclipse Rite. Subject: Orion Valcair. Death shadow refusal. Throne. Binding. Temple correction. Separation. Containment veil. Cyrra Noct's original shadow. Result: King made bindable. Keeper made shadowless. Cyrra read the last line until it stopped being a sentence and became a wound. King made bindable. Keeper made shadowless. That was the exchange. Orion had not merely lost a dangerous part of himself. He had been made easier to rule. And Cyrra had not merely been emptied. She had been made into the place where his refusal could be hidden without staining the throne. She turned to him. "They did not save you from monstrosity." His gold eyes met hers, hard and wounded. "They made you easier to command." The death shadow bowed its head once. Orion's face tightened as if the agreement hurt more than her accusation. Celine's voice cut in, sharp now. "And because of that, Valcair survived. Your father's court survived. The dragon houses survived. There are refusals that become civil war if left inside royal blood." Cyrra looked at the vault below them. "And there are children who become storage if adults fear consequence." The words struck Celine's face like cold water. For one breath, the priestess looked almost angry enough to become honest. Then the moment closed. She lifted her black-gloved hand. "Keeper containment protocol." The eclipse glass blades rose around Cyrra, not toward her throat, toward the empty place behind her feet. The doorway of darkness that had returned Oral's shadow flickered there, fragile and newly awakened. The guards moved as one, blades angled downward, ready to cut the absence itself. Orion stepped forward. The death shadow blocked him, not to protect Celine, to stop him from making the old mistake in a new shape. Cyrra saw it before he did. "Do not turn my wound into your chance to be noble." His eyes snapped to her. The words were cruel. They were also necessary. She had been used once to carry what he feared. She would not be used now to carry his redemption. Orion stopped. His hands curled at his sides, and the restraint in him looked almost painful. "What do you need?" he asked. "Not command. Not apology. A question." Cyrra did not trust it fully, but she heard the difference. She looked down into the vault. "Where is my shadow?" Every stolen shadow below the palace went still. Even Celine seemed to stop breathing. The vault answered. "Original shadow. Cyrra Noct. Status: active containment veil. Location: beneath royal death. Shadow. Condition: damaged by prolonged burden. Restoration requires owner consent." Orion's jaw tightened. "Then return it." The vault did not move. Cyrra looked at him, a bitter smile almost breaking through her fear. "It said owner consent." His expression changed, because he understood. For the first time, the law did not ask the king what should happen to the girl. It asked the girl. Celine's voice softened in a way Cyrra hated. "If your shadow returns, the death shadow returns fully to him. If it returns fully to him, the eclipse-dragon may wake with all the rage we locked away." Orion's face darkened. "You do not know that. I know what it was becoming." The vault corrected her again. "Unproven. Celine's calm cracked deeper. Cyrra knelt at the edge of the open circle. The death shadow lowered itself behind her, not touching. Its vast skull almost level with her shoulder. She could feel its nearness like winter pressure. Not evil, not safe. Something wounded enough to be dangerous if forced. She placed her palm against the glass. "I will not return all of you tonight," she told the shadows below. "I will not let them make me a doorway they can shove open whenever truth becomes useful. But I will ask." The vault brightened. Cyrra's voice shook. "What did my shadow refuse?" No one moved. The answer rose slowly from the deepest part of the vault. Subject: Cyrra Noct. Age at removal: 6. Original refusal: temple custody. Statement recorded before sedation: "I want to go home." Cyrra's breath left her. Not in a sob. In absence. She had never remembered saying that. She had never remembered wanting home because the palace had raised her to believe no such place had ever existed for her. But somewhere, before sweetened milk and temple hands and a shadow peeled from the wall, a child had refused to belong to them. "I want to go home." The death shadow behind her made a low sound. Orion closed his eyes. Celine said nothing. That silence was guilt. Cyrra pressed both hands to the glass. "Show me." The vault obeyed. Far below the other shadows, something small began to rise. At first, Cyrra thought it was a child's shadow, thin and trembling. Then the blue light touched it, and she saw the damage. Her shadow had dragon claw marks through its ribs. A long black seam ran from throat to heart, where Orion's death shadow had been wrapped inside it. It lifted its face toward her. It was hers, and not hers anymore. The eclipse circle split wider beneath Cyrra's knees. Orion reached for her, then stopped himself before crossing the line. The shadow that had once belonged to Cyrra pressed one torn hand against the glass from below. Then it spoke in a child's voice scraped raw by years of holding a king's darkness. "Did he survive because I didn't?" No one in the eclipse hall answered the shadow child. Cyrra stared through the cracked blue-black glass at the torn thing that had once belonged to her. It still looked 6 years old. That was the cruelty. Not the claw marks through its ribs, not the black seam from throat to heart where Orion's death shadow had been bound inside it, but the smallness of it. The palace had not stolen from a woman strong enough to understand sacrifice. It had taken from a child still young enough to ask where home was. "Did he survive because I didn't?" the shadow asked again. Orion's face went hollow. Celine Orvath answered first. "A king survives, so thousands do not burn." Cyrra looked up slowly. "And who decided one little girl was worth less than thousands?" "The temple decided what the crown could not bear to know." Orion's voice sharpened. "Do not hide behind my crown." Celine turned on him. "Your crown is the reason this hall is not ash." The vault pulsed beneath them. False claim. The words burned under Celine's feet. The court saw them. So did Orion. For the first time, the high eclipse priestess looked less like law and more like someone caught inside her own record. Cyrra rose from her knees. "The vault does not call you careful. It calls you false." "The vault records wounds," Celine said. "It does not understand rule. A wound understands what made it." Behind Cyrra, the death shadow lifted its skull. It did not roar. It simply watched Celine with the stillness of something that had once been called monster by the people who cut it apart. Below the glass, Cyrra's torn child shadow pressed one hand upward. Did he know? The hall tightened. Cyrra turned to Orion. He did not answer quickly. That mattered. Not enough to absolve him, but enough to keep her from looking away. "I remember the rite," he said. "Blue fire. Pain." Celine's voice. "My father telling me not to shame Valcair by screaming." His hand flexed once. "I do not remember you." The child shadow lowered its head. Of course he did not remember her. The crime had been built so no one important had to. Celine stepped into the silence. "You see? His will was not involved. This was preservation." Cyrra's voice went cold. "You keep using clean words for dirty hands." The vault wrote again. Memory alteration confirmed. Royal subject. Partial removal. Keeper subject. Full removal. Consent status. Absent. Absent. Such a small word for theft. Orion stared at the record until the anger in his face changed direction. Open every record tied to Cyrra Noct. Celine's answer came instantly. No. The replacement shadows behind the temple guards rose before their bodies did. Cyrra saw it. Orion saw it too. His command reached the men. Celine's reached what had been put behind them. That was the real throne beneath Valcair. Celine lifted her hand. By eclipse preservation law, the keeper vessel may be sealed until judgment. Cyrra gave a broken, humorless laugh. You emptied me, used me, exiled me, and now you want to seal me for remembering it. You are not remembering, Celine said. You are being awakened by a death shadow that does not care what truth destroys. The death shadow opened its jaws. Cyrra raised one hand. Do not. It froze. Orion looked at her with something like surprise. Cyrra did not soften. I will not let either side use rage to prove her right. The easier thing would have been to let the shadow tear through every false oath in the room. But the child beneath the glass was still waiting, and Cyrra would not turn her own wound into another spectacle for the court. She pressed her palm to the circle. My shadow asked whether he survived because I did not. Answer fully. The vault brightened. Royal survival. Stabilized by containment veil. Eclipse-dragon emergence. Delayed. Keeper loss. Total. Exchange. Unauthorized. Cyrra closed her eyes. Not prophecy. Not destiny. An exchange made over a sleeping child. Orion lowered himself to one knee before the open vault. The court went breathless. Cyrra did not mistake it for romance. A kneeling king could still make the world about his grief. Orion looked through the glass at the torn child shadow. I survived because they used you. I did not choose it, but I wore the crown it protected. The death shadow bowed its head as if one hidden chain had loosened. Then Cyrra's shadow whispered, Then where is home? The question hurt more than accusation. Cyrra had once asked that, before the sweetened milk, before the temple hands, before her shadow was peeled from the wall. I want to go home. The palace had taught her there was no before, no family, no door that had ever closed behind her. She looked down. Where was I taken from? Celine's face changed. Only for a moment. But Cyrra saw it. So did Orion. The vault opened beneath every foot in the hall. Cyrra Noct. Origin classification. Falsified. Foundling status. False. Sunless plague orphan status. False. Lineage. House Noct. Last recorded eclipse keepers of the Western Observatory. Family refusal. Surrender of child to royal containment. Temple action. Erasure. Cyrra stopped breathing. House Noct. Not a name given to a hollow ward. A house. A family. A refusal. Her child shadow pressed both hands to the glass. They said we had no home. The vault answered. Home location sealed. Céline Moufest. She snatched an eclipse glass blade from a guard and drove it toward the circle beneath Cyrra's hand. Orion surged forward, but 3 false shadows dragged their own guards into his path. The blade struck the black sun circle. Pain shot through Cyrra's feet and spine. Below her, the seam in her child shadow's chest split wider. Orion broke through the guards and seized Celine's wrist before she could strike again. His voice was deadly quiet. Where is her home? Celine breathed hard. If she opens that door, she will not find comfort. She will find why we feared keepers. The cracked vault answered anyway. Home location. Not destroyed. Home status. Imprisoned. Access point. Beneath the eclipse throne. The hall fell silent. Cyrra turned toward the throne Orion had abandoned. Blue-black light bled through the marble beneath it, outlining a hidden door that had slept under royal feet for 20 years. Then something underneath knocked back. The marble beneath the eclipse throne answered with 3 more knocks. Not frantic. Measured. Like someone on the other side had spent 20 years learning that screaming wasted breath. The court backed away from the throne in a wave of silk, armor, and fear. Even the false oath shadows hesitated. They still stood too straight behind their owners, but their edges trembled now. As if the thing beneath the throne had called to something older than the temple's command, Cyrra did not move. The blue-black door glowed under Orion's abandoned seat, its outline cutting through the marble where generations of Valcair kings had placed their feet. The truth had not been hidden in a forgotten wing, or buried beneath a ruined chapel. It had slept under the throne itself, pressed beneath royal weight so long the palace had mistaken imprisonment for foundation. Celine's voice came low. "Do not open it." Orion still held her wrist. "That is no longer your command to give." She looked at him then, not as priestess to king, but as the woman who knew what his crown was made of. "If you open that door, you may lose more than a shadow." Cyrra turned from the throne to Orion. "Let her finish." He looked at her, surprised. Cyrra's face remained pale, but her voice held. "She always tells the truth after hiding the part that damns her." Celine's mouth tightened. The death shadow behind Cyrra lowered its skull, blue eyes fixed on the throne door. It did not crawl forward. It waited. That restraint frightened the court more than violence would have. Celine drew a breath. House Noct was not destroyed during the Sunless Plague. The vault wrote beneath her. True. A sound moved through the hall. Cyrra's heart struck once, hard. Celine continued. They were removed from the Western Observatory after refusing royal containment law. The vault wrote again. Incomplete. Cyrra's hands curled. Say the missing part. Celine's eyes cut to her. Your family refused to surrender you. The words did not land gently. They hit like a door opening inside her chest. For 20 years, Cyrra had been taught that no one had come for her because no one had existed to come. A foundling did not wait for family. A palace ward did not ask why no mother's voice haunted the corridors. A shadowless girl learned to make peace with absence because asking for proof of love only gave the court another way to call her empty. But her family had refused. They had not given her away. They had been punished for trying to keep her. Below the throne, the knocking came again. 1, 2, 3. Cyrra stepped toward it. Orion released Celine and moved to follow. The death shadow shifted between him and Cyrra. Not a style. Warning. Cyrra looked back at Orion. Do not come as king. The sentence stopped him more effectively than any blade. His face hardened from instinct, then changed as understanding reached him. The throne door did not lead to a room that belonged to him. It led to a wound his throne had been sitting on. Slowly, Orion removed the dark gold crown from his head. The court gasped. He did not look at them. He set the crown on the marble beside the throne. I come as the one who benefited, he said. The vault pulsed. Accepted. Cyrra did not thank him. But she did not stop him. Together they approached the throne door. Celine moved once. An Oral's returned horned shadow snapped its finger toward her again. She froze. The boy stood behind his mother, trembling, but no longer obedient in the wrong places. His shadow's accusation held her as surely as chains. Cyrra knelt before the glowing outline. The door did not have a handle. Of course it did not. The palace had never intended the imprisoned to open it from above. She placed her palm against the blue-black seam. Pain flashed through the empty space behind her feet. Beneath the vault, her torn child shadow pressed its palm upward in the same place. The seam opened. Cold air rose from below. Not dungeon air, night air. Old night. Kept underground too long. A stairway appeared beneath the throne, spiraling down into darkness lit by faint eclipse-blue stars. Along the walls, carved constellations had been scratched through by temple blades. Some had been repaired by hand. Not elegantly. Desperately. Cyrra descended first. Orion followed 2 steps behind, not close enough to claim protection, not far enough to pretend distance absolved him. At the bottom waited a chamber that should not have fit beneath the palace. A broken observatory. Its ceiling was stone, but the stone held a trapped sky. Black glass embedded with thousands of tiny blue lights, some still burning, some gouged out. Around the circular room stood 7 locked archways, each sealed with eclipse chains. Behind those chains, shadows moved. Not stolen fragments. People. Thin, pale, older than Cyrra had imagined and younger than grief had any right to make them look. Men and women in faded dark robes stood behind the archways with their hands lifted against invisible barriers. Their bodies cast no shadows. Cyrra stopped breathing. A woman stepped forward behind the central chain. Her hair was dark, streaked with silver. Her face was sharp from hunger, but her eyes were Cyrra's gray-blue exactly. The woman looked at Cyrra as if the last 20 years had just struck her in the chest. Then she said, "My little star." Cyrra broke. Not loudly. Her body simply forgot how to hold itself upright. Orion reached out, then stopped before touching her. That restraint hurt almost as much as comfort would have. The woman pressed both hands to the barrier. "Do not let the king open these chains." Orion went still. Cyrra lifted her head. "Why?" Her mother's eyes moved to him, then to the death shadow that had followed them down and crouched in the stairwell behind them. "Because the chains were written to answer royal guilt," she said. "If he breaks them, the prison will make him owner of the mercy he returns." Cyrra wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Then how do they open?" The woman looked at Cyrra with a grief deeper than reunion. "By the shadow that was taken from you." The chamber darkened. Above them, the eclipse hall thundered as the vault shifted. Below, Cyrra's torn child shadow rose through the floor like smoke, dragging the black seam of Orion's death shadow with it. Orion stepped forward despite himself. "If she takes back her shadow, what happens to mine?" Cyrra's mother answered before Selene could lie from above. "Yours remembers what it refused." The death shadow lifted its head. The chains on all 7 archways tightened at once. Cyrra's child shadow reached toward her from the floor, small and ruined and waiting. Then the central chain carved one final record into the air. Keeper restoration requires choice. Only one shadow may return before the eclipse closes. Cyrra looked at her mother, then at Orion's death shadow, then at the torn child version of herself. For the first time in her life, everyone waited for Cyrra Noct to decide what would happen to her own absence. Cyrra did not choose quickly. That alone frightened them. Her mother stood behind the central chain, hands pressed to the barrier, her gray-blue eyes filled with 20 years of love trapped behind warning. Orion stood 2 steps behind Cyrra, crownless beneath the buried observatory's broken stars. His death shadow crouched near the stairwell, huge and black and trembling with every memory it had been forced to forget. Between them rose the torn child shadow that had once belonged to Cyrra. "Only one shadow may return before the eclipse closes." The words burned above the chain. Cyrra understood the cruelty at once. Selene had written the prison so the stolen would have to choose against one another. Her mother's freedom, Orion's wholeness, Cyrra's own missing shadow. A kingdom built on theft had one final habit: making the wounded compete for the right to be restored. Cyrra looked at the child shadow. "What do you want?" Her mother's voice broke. "Cyrra." "No," Cyrra said softly. "Everyone has answered for her. Temple, crown, vault, king, prison. Not again." The chamber went silent. The child shadow lifted its torn face. The black seam across its chest pulsed where Orion's death shadow had been stitched through it. "I wanted to go home," it whispered. "Then I wanted to stop hurting. Then I wanted someone to notice I was gone." Cyrra's throat closed. Behind her, Orion made a sound too low to become words. "If I return," the child shadow said, "I bring the hurt with me. I know. I am not clean anymore." "No," Cyrra whispered. "But you were mine before they made you useful." The shadow trembled. Cyrra held out her hand. "I choose what was taken from me," the chamber answered. Owner consent recorded. Pain came like weather. It entered Cyrra from every direction. Sweetened milk on a child's tongue, temple hands carrying her half-asleep body, her shadow peeling from the wall, her own voice crying for a home the palace later taught her had never existed. She saw her mother younger, fighting temple guards. She saw a man with Cyrra's eyes dragged from the Western Observatory. She saw Selene beside a young prince in the eclipse circle, watching one child's absence become another child's cage. Cyrra fell to her knees. Orion moved. "Do not touch her," her mother warned. He stopped. The death shadow lifted its skull toward him with the same warning. This return belonged to Cyrra, not to his guilt, not to his need to repair what had broken beneath his crown. The child shadow rose fully from the floor. For one breath, it hovered before Cyrra, like a little girl made from every year she had been denied. Then it stepped behind her feet. The chamber went dark. Then Cyrra cast a shadow. A real one. Small. Uneven. Torn along the edges. It shook behind her like a wounded animal, learning the shape of its own body. It did not spread wings. It did not crown her. It did not make the Noct prisoners kneel. It was only a girl's shadow returned after years of being forced to carry a king's darkness. And that was why the room broke. Her mother covered her mouth. Orion lowered his head as if looking at Cyrra's shadow hurt worse than facing a blade. The seam in Cyrra's returned shadow began to split. Blue-black fire leaked from it. Orion's death shadow arched in the stairwell, roaring without sound as the black thread binding it to Cyrra tore strand by strand. It did not rush into Orion. It dragged itself forward and stopped before him, shaking with the violence of finally belonging to itself again. Orion faced it without crown, without throne, without command. "What do you want from me?" he asked. The death shadow opened its jaws. Cyrra thought it would say no again. Instead, it lowered its head toward the crown far above them. "Remember," it said. The buried observatory shook. Above, the eclipse hall thundered, as if the throne itself had heard the word and hated it. Celine's voice rang down the stairwell. "Stop the restoration!" False oath shadows poured down the steps like black water. Guard shadows, priest shadows, noble shadows, all sharpened into obedient blades. Their owners screamed somewhere above, but the replacements no longer needed bodies to obey. Orion turned. The death shadow moved with him, not behind him. Beside him, for the first time, the Dragon King and the part of himself that had refused the crown binding faced the same lie together. Cyrra rose unsteadily. Her returned shadow rose with her. The central chain around her mother's archway cracked once. Cyrra looked toward it. "I thought only one shadow could return." Her mother's eyes filled with fear. "A keeper's shadow does not open prisons by force. It opens them by consent. Now that yours has returned, the prison must ask whether we agreed to stay." The 7 archways lit blue. One by one, the imprisoned Noct keepers pressed their hands to the chains. The vault wrote again. House Noct confinement. Consent status. Absent. Witness status. Active. Keeper shadow restored. Prison claim weakening. Celine screamed from above. "If they leave, every death shadow we buried will wake." Orion looked at Cyrra's mother. "What happens if they wake?" Her answer was quiet. "Then every dragon must answer what it was taught to shed." The false oath shadows reached the bottom stair. Orion stepped forward, but Cyrra moved beside him. Her returned shadow stretched behind her, damaged and trembling but present. The death shadow spread its black wings across the chamber. Cyrra's mother shouted, "Do not let it fight alone." The 7 keepers pressed harder against their chains. Old locks woke. The central archway shattered. Cyrra's mother fell forward through broken blue light, free for the first time in 20 years. But before Cyrra could reach her, the crown above answered Celine's command. A spear of dark gold light shot down through the observatory ceiling and struck Orion's death shadow through the chest. The shadow convulsed. Orion dropped to one knee, choking on the same wound. And from far above, Celine's voice descended like judgment. "If the king remembers everything, the dragon beneath him wakes." The spear did not pierce flesh. It pierced memory. Orion Valcair hit the observatory floor with one hand braced against the black stone. His breath locked in his chest. His crownless head bowed beneath pain that did not belong only to his body. Across the chamber, his death shadow convulsed under the dark gold light that had struck through its ribs. No blood fell. No wound opened. Yet the shadow's blue fire flickered as if the crown had found the exact place where refusal lived and driven a nail through it. Cyrra reached for him, then stopped. The old warning held her back. Do not let guilt become another chain. Her mother caught Cyrra's wrist, not harshly, but with 20 years of terror behind her touch. "If you touch him while the crown is binding his memory, it will make you the bridge." Cyrra's throat tightened. The bridge to what? To whatever the throne wants him to become. Above them, Celine's voice descended through the cracked ceiling. "Stand down, Cyrra Noct. You have your shadow. You have your mother. Take both and live. Leave the king to the crown before his dragon wakes beneath all of us." False oath shadows poured into the observatory, black and blade-shaped. sliding across the floor without the consent of the bodies that had cast them. The freed central chain lay broken at Cyrra's mother's feet, but the other 6 archways still held the remaining Noct keepers behind blue barriers. They pressed their palms to the locks from within, faces pale, eyes furious, waiting for consent the prison had denied for decades. Orion forced himself to lift his head. Celine. The name came out broken. The crown spear twisted. Egasped. The death shadow gave a soundless roar, its wings scraping against the floor. Cyrra's returned shadow trembled behind her, small and damaged, but it did not run. For the first time in her life, Cyrra had something behind her that was hers, and the sight of it standing with her made the chamber feel less like a grave. Celine's voice sharpened. "Do not mistake pain for truth, Your Majesty. Your death shadow refused the throne, binding because it did not want restraint. That thing beneath your skin is older than royal mercy. If it remembers fully, it will not ask permission before burning Valcair clean." Cyrra's mother looked up toward the ceiling. "You still lie by choosing which fear to name." "Who?" The vault beneath the observatory floor flickered. Partial truth. Orion's jaw tightened. Cyrra looked at her mother. "What part is true?" Her mother's face dimmed with grief. "The eclipse-dragon is real." The chamber stilled. Even the false oath shadows paused. "It is the ancient form every Valcair king carries," her mother said. "Not evil by nature, not safe by nature. It is what remains when dragon blood outgrows human command." Celine's voice cut down. "And it devours kingdoms." "No," Cyrra's mother said. "It devours cages." The death shadow's blue eyes flared. Orion looked at Cyrra then, and she saw the boy from the memory beneath the king. The child in white ceremonial cloth, standing in blue fire, asking if it would hurt and receiving silence for an answer. "I was taught," he said slowly, each word dragged through pain, "that the dragon beneath me wanted ruin." The crown spear twisted again. He nearly collapsed. Cyrra stepped forward. Her mother tightened her grip. "Cyrra, I will not carry him," Cyrra said. "I know." Then she looked at Orion. "But I can ask the record." She knelt and pressed one hand to the observatory floor. Her returned shadow knelt with her, uneven and torn, its small hand aligning with hers for the first time. "What did the eclipse-dragon refuse?" Cyrra asked. The floor went black. The answer did not come quickly. Deep beneath the palace, something vast shifted. Not waking, listening. The vault wrote in slow blue fire. Subject: Valcair eclipse-dragon. Original refusal. Crown: command without witness. Secondary refusal: royal obedience rite performed without consent. Temple classification: monstrosity. Correct classification: unbound sovereign shadow. Celine screamed from above. "Stop reading!" The crown spear brightened. Orion's death shadow thrashed. Cyrra's mother shouted. "The crown is forcing the old binding again." The false oath shadows attacked. They rushed forward in a black wave. Blades for hands, temple obedience sharpened into motion. Orion tried to stand, but the spear through his shadow dragged him down. Cyrra's mother stepped before her with no weapon, only open hands and a face that had once refused to surrender a child. The 6 imprisoned keepers behind the archways began to speak. Not spells. Names. Their own. Cyrra Noct. Vera Noct. Maris Noct. Solen Noct. Arik Noct. Demerin Noct. Each name struck its chain like a hammer. The barriers cracked. Cyrra understood at once. The prison had been built by denied consent. It broke under restored testimony. She stood. "Do you consent to remain imprisoned?" All 6 answered together. "No." The archways shattered. Blue light exploded through the observatory as the remaining Noct keepers fell forward, free and breathing, their shadowless bodies shaking under the trapped stars. The false oath shadows recoiled from them, not because the keepers were stronger, but because they had witnesses now. Not worshippers, not subjects, witnesses. A returned shadow did not heal a kingdom. It made the kingdom answer. Cyrra turned toward Orion. The crown spear still held his death shadow pinned. His face was pale, His hand pressed to the floor as if he could keep himself from being dragged into the old binding by will alone. "What do you choose?" Cyrra asked. Celine's voice snapped from above. "He chooses survival." Orion lifted his eyes to Cyrra. For the first time, there was no command in them. No throne. No old royal certainty. Only terror, shame, and something more dangerous than both. Decision. "I choose to remember," he said. The crown spear cracked. Celine screamed. Cyrra's mother seized Cyrra's shoulders. "If he remembers all of it, the dragon beneath him will answer." Cyrra looked at Orion's death shadow. It stared back at her, no longer begging to hide, no longer asking her to carry what he feared. "Then let it answer him," Cyrra said. "Not me." Orion reached toward his death shadow, but stopped before touching it. "Do you consent?" The chamber went utterly still. The question was so simple that it broke something older than magic. The death shadow lowered its horned head. "Yes." The crown spear shattered. Dark gold light burst outward, tearing through the false oath shadows and ripping them from the floor like dead banners. Orion's death shadow surged back toward him, but not as a chain returning to its post. It entered him like memory entering a body that had finally stopped pretending innocence. Orion arched, both hands slamming against the stone. Blue-black fire spread under his skin. Above them, the eclipse throne cracked down the center. The palace shook. Deep beneath Valcair, something enormous opened its eye. Cyrra saw it through the floor. A dragon, not made of flesh alone, but of old eclipse fire, buried shadow, and royal refusal. Its eye was larger than the throne hall. Its pupil narrowed on Orion, then on Cyrra, then on the freed Noct keepers. Celine's voice fell from above, no longer calm. "Now you understand." The buried dragon moved, and the palace began to rise from its foundations. Marble split above them. Dust fell through the broken observatory ceiling like pale ash. The hidden door beneath the throne widened, until the eclipse hall and the buried Noct prison were no longer separate wounds. Nobles screamed overhead as false oath shadows lost their shapes and clawed at the walls. Beneath all of it, the ancient eclipse-dragon opened its second eye. Cyrra felt it before she understood it. Not fire, memory. The dragon was coiled beneath Valcair, wrapped around the palace foundations like a black sun with ribs. Its scales were made of everything the crown had forced away from itself. Fear, refusal, rage, mercy, grief, hunger, and every truth the temple had renamed monstrosity. It had not been sleeping. It had been held down by crowns, rites, obedient shadows, and generations of kings taught that command was safer than memory. Orion stood before it, crownless and shaking. His death shadow had returned, but it did not lie at his feet. It stood behind him, vast and horned, damaged but whole enough to refuse. He looked more dangerous than he had ever looked on the throne, and more human than he had ever looked beneath a crown. Celine appeared at the broken stair above, robes torn by blue light, eclipse glass blade in hand. "Now you see," she said. "This is what I held back." The dragon's eye turned toward her. She did not flinch. That was when Cyrra understood Celine completely. The priestess did not worship cruelty. She worshipped control, because terror had once taught her to call it mercy. "You held back truth," Cyrra said. "I held back ruin." The vault answered beneath their feet. "Partial truth." Celine's mouth tightened. "Ask your king how many will die if that thing rises." The court waited for Orion to give the old answer. "Bind it. Cut it. Force it down. Survive first, and count the bodies later." He did not. Orion stepped forward with empty hands. "I will not bind you before I ask what you refused." The palace went silent. The eclipse-dragon's eye narrowed. The vault wrote in black fire, "Valcair eclipse-dragon. Original refusal. Crown without witness. Original wound. Command without memory. Original demand. Rule must answer to what it buries." Orion bowed his head. "I wore a crown made easier by theft. I do not claim innocence because I was a child when they began. I became king after. I ruled from the throne that sat over her home." His death shadow lowered its head behind him. Celine's voice sharpened. "A confession will not stop an ancient dragon. No, Cyrra said. But consent might. Her mother caught her hand. Not as vessel. Cyrra squeezed back once. Never again. Then she faced the dragon. I will not hold what belongs to him. I will not hide what belongs to the court. I will not become the place where powerful people put what they fear. Her voice shook, but it did not break. I am not a lock. I am witness. The freed Noct keepers repeated the word. Witness. The vault opened all at once, not to release every stolen shadow in chaos. To count them. Records rose through both chambers. Names, refusals, removals, replacement shadows, false oaths, altered memories. Marriages sealed by obedience. Heirs made loyal by absence. Dragon forms buried under temple law. The nobles did not kneel, they read. That was worse. Every clean family history darkened under its own record. A returned shadow did not make a person pure. It made them answerable. Celine lifted her blade. Then, answer this. She drove the eclipse glass into her own shadow. For the first time, Cyrra saw it. Not a priestess, shaped shadow, but a little girl kneeling in ash beside a burned village, hands lifted toward a dragon in the sky. Temple elders had found that child and taught her that fear could become holiness if she gave it rules. The vault wrote, Selene Orvat. Original refusal. Uncontrolled dragon mercy. After village burning. Self-surrendered shadow to temple discipline. Later actions. Unlawful removals. Forced containment. Royal memory alteration. Keeper erasure. Selene went white. Cyrra looked at her without pity or cruelty. You do not get to use your wound as the law for everyone else. For a moment, Celine looked older than power. Then her blade cracked. Across the palace, false oath shadows collapsed into blue ash. Nobles cried out as their true shadows rose from the vault, not forcing themselves back, only waiting to be asked, one by one. The eclipse-dragon lifted its head beneath Valcair. Orion turned to it. I cannot promise I will not fear you, but I will not cut you away again to make myself easier to obey. The dragon's eye burned brighter. Then it asked, in a voice that moved through stone, blood, and shadow, will you rule with witness? Orion looked at Cyrra, not as savior, not as owner, as the woman whose absence had carried the crime his kingdom was built upon. Yes, he said. If she consents to stand where she can refuse me. Cyrra held his chaza. There was something between them now, dangerous and unfinished, born from anger, truth, restraint, and the terrible intimacy of being seen at the site of a wound. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. Not love simple enough for court songs. But it was a beginning that did not ask her to disappear. I will stand as keeper, she said. Not queen. Not vessel. Not your redemption. Orion's answer was quiet. Then I will stand where your no can reach me. The dragon closed one eye. The palace stopped rising. Stone settled. Chains broke. The Noct archways opened fully, and the freed keepers stepped beneath the throne that had imprisoned them. Above, the eclipse hall doors unlocked, and the stolen shadows began to rise from the vault, each waiting beside its owner until asked, not forced. Celine fell to her knees, not in worship, but beneath the weight of her own returned shadow standing behind her. By dawn the eclipse had passed. Orion ordered the throne moved away from the black sun circle. The vault records remained open to the sky, visible to every house that had profited from obedience without memory. The broken eclipse crown was not hidden. Cyrra insisted on that. Hidden broken things became myths. Displayed broken things became warnings. House Noct was restored. But Cyrra did not take a noble seat. She stood at the edge of the open circle with her mother beside her, and her returned shadow at her feet, small, torn, and real. Orion came without crown or guards. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he asked, May I walk with you? Cyrra looked down at their shadows. His was vast and dragon-shaped. Hers was slight and damaged. Beside me, she said. He nodded. Beside you. Together they walked out beneath the fading blue light. For the first time in her life, Cyrra Noct left the palace with a shadow at her feet. And behind her walked a Dragon King who finally understood that following was not the same as claiming.